Hey everybody, welcome to another video. I am Mike B, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that you guys have been hounding me to cover for years, but I either didn't have the time, the funding to get actual, props to use as an example and play dress up to piss a bunch of people off, LARPing in my mommy's basement, or I just didn't have the time, or I didn't think it was going to really be a popular subject that's been covered ad nauseum. But due to the overwhelmingly positive response I got on the general why didn't the Allies overall wear camouflage patterns in the ETO during World War II, and I kind of broke the surface on that. There were more details and stuff like, yes, I know the Denison smock existed. It wasn't really widely used, maybe at the very end, but also it's a different camouflage pattern than the frog skin, and that's kind of what was relevant to the SS. So I'll make another video on that in the future, because a lot of you guys have the problem of focusing on and trying to look for any exception to any video that I make about the norm, and you can literally find an exception to anything I make a video on. That's not the point of the video. The point of the video is to get the broader picture, and then we'll go into detail about the nuanced exceptions at a later date. I like to start with the macro and then we move down to the micro. So that's what we're going to do with this, which is obviously the elephant in the room, is going to be German camouflage of the Second World War, which obviously I love. I'm not going to make fun of anybody or rag on anybody for that. There are some people that go a little bit overboard with it, but I mean, it's pretty cool. A couple of reasons. A, because it was the first time that a military force was issuing camouflage on a large scale. The Wehrmacht had their own camouflage patterns, and the Waffen SS in particular, which is actually a paramilitary organization, not part of the Wehrmacht. Check that out. It's a political organization. But they use a lot of military equipment and such like that, so it's paramilitary, but technically not part of the Wehrmacht. So they were using different camouflage patterns than the Wehrmacht was. Although they did use like the some of the army patterns, and there was some crossover with some exceptions, which we'll also talk about in the future. It was generally the Waffen SS were going to be using different camouflage patterns than the Wehrmacht. Now, the Wehrmacht, starting in 1931, adopted the Zeltbahn Model 31 pattern in the splinter camouflage, which was the first really wide issue besides Switzerland around the same time, and Italy in the late 20s and early 30s was when gear started to be made. Shelter halves, certain helmet covers and things like that were being messed around with. But basically in 1931, that was the first time Germany adopted a camouflage pattern in official gear capacity. Now that was used throughout the Second World War, and that pattern was used beyond in other militaries and stuff like that. And so after that, the Wehrmacht and the Waffen SS at that point, because they realized that they were going to be not just the Allgemeine SS, which is like Hitler's bodyguards, which was the original purpose of it, but they were actually going to have units that were trained in military tactics that would be deployed outside of Germany at a later date, or if need be. So they, just like the Wehrmacht, started experimenting with camouflage patterns, and they were looking at different uniforms, what the best method of wearing the camouflage would be, the best pattern. And I'll be going into detail. I'm going to try to acquire one of each pattern that I'm going to be talking about briefly in this video. I'll try to do that as time goes on and make a more intricate, detailed video on that specific pattern, like who came up with it, when it was adopted, all that stuff, and what the inspiration was, because that's a really cool story with one of my favorite SS patterns besides this one, which we'll get into in a second. But I'm just kind of laying out the groundwork, because this is going to be an extensive thing. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be a series. It's just going to be something that I like talking about, and I'm going to do more research. It's been a while since I really was, down the rabbit hole of SS camouflage. I know a lot of you guys started out, and that's why, you see mainly SS reenactors at World War II events, because it looks cool. It does. It looks cool. It was pretty effective. The whole idea of wearing camouflage, they thought that wearing camouflage uniforms would reduce casualties by about 15% in combat operations, due to the fact that it reduces the chances of being spotted. And again, we've talked about the purpose of camouflage before. And so those concepts were kind of being played with and implemented at this point. So during the late 1930s, you start seeing helmet covers and smocks, which this is, and we'll talk about why they went with that at first, being developed for the Waffen SS by private companies and designers. They were being paid. And the problem was, initially, there was a problem with the method of printing the pattern onto the cotton duck material, which was water resistant, and that was it had to be hand printed. So it was a very slow and tedious and expensive process. So they started really manufacturing ground sheets, or Zeltbahns, and then some smocks and helmet covers. And it was very, very labor intensive and very slow to get out to the people, like it's specifically in 1939 in the invasion of Poland. The Waffen SS was wearing camouflage for sure, but it was not in the numbers that we're going to see later on in the war, like especially in Russia, henceforth from 1941 on. So the Waffen-SS decided to go with a reversible smock, right? We'll get into why it was reversible and stuff and who studied that and why that is. But you can see on the opposite side of this, it is reversible to a tan or autumn color, right? Which I will show you in the fall when I do a camouflage test with this bad boy. I'll do a summer camouflage test. I know before you stitch Nazis get in there, there are I think a dozen surviving examples of the palm helmet covers. I did that so it could be consistent for the camouflage test. For historical accuracy, I'd probably have a different pattern on here. So they came out with, I think, 5 or 6 patterns that were used pretty frequently that we've got documented in pictures on their smocks and helmet covers. And then, of course, Dot 44 came out in 1944, and then Leibmuster came out in 45, or late 44, but started to be used in 45. But we're going to be talking about the early stuff, the smocks, and what the purpose was, how they were worn, and their effectiveness. So there was plain tree is what we call it, plain tree. It came from a certain kind of tree. These are families of camouflage because they had a few different variations throughout the war as they went from being hand printed to machine printed on the material, and there were different variations. They were all relatively within the same family though. So you're gonna have oak leaf, which is a little bit, I mean, they're very similar using kind of the dots and stuff, but the pattern itself is different. Both use the same relative color scheme, and we'll get into these videos, but all that stuff. And it was generally going to be a green or summer/spring side, and then the reversible to the autumn or fall and autumn or winter side, which is going to be more brown. So the whole purpose of the smock was to actually at first be worn over all of the gear and the entire uniform on the top, and they had they started rolling them up like at the bottom because they had these slits in the side that were supposed to give access to your gear and your pockets underneath the whole smock, so you were completely covered. Well, that didn't last long, and we're looking at about 1940-ish, you start seeing this second pattern came out, which was still the same idea with the slits, but you start seeing the gear being worn, even in the Poland campaign in 1939. You start seeing the gear being worn on the outside and the pockets, or the smocks being rolled up on the bottom for easy access to pockets underneath, because when you're wearing the gear, the slits are hard to access, etc., etc. However, there's a reason they sacrificed all that kind of annoying gear setup for this, is because it was shown by troops, SS troops, that they were taking longer. The enemy was taking longer to see them than they would expect wearing the Feldgrau uniform when they were wearing helmet covers and such in a fixed position. It was harder to spot from the air. If their position was camouflaged very well, it was very easy to just kind of lay still. And I don't know if it was anecdotal and if it was just maybe a placebo effect that they had that made them think that they actually had an advantage, but the bottom line is it was kind of a morale booster, and the troops liked it. It set them apart from the Wehrmacht. They were elite. They knew that, and their uniforms proved that. It looks very intimidating when you've got guys wearing camouflage, and you go, what are these guys doing? Like somebody said in that camouflage video where I was talking about solid color versus camouflage. You see a solid color like Feldgrau, that looks intimidating. That's like a force. Okay, I get it. You see people that have the same gear but are wearing camouflage, and you're like, those are the guys that I'm not going to see kill me in my sleep at night. And that's kind of the psychological effect that I think they liked as well, is that kind of the weird, this is new, generally people at that point, civilians hadn't seen entire military forces wearing camouflage, so it was a pretty effective thing. So by 1940, they started ramping up more production of smocks, and they started to be worn. And then 1942, they did away with the slits right here. They modified the smocks based on feedback they had gotten from troops saying, hey, we're not using that. We're wearing our gear on the outside, and it's still camouflaging us enough and being effective enough without having to, fight to get to our equipment or pockets. And so in 1942, they came out. This is a model 1940 smock in the Palmenmuster, which is my favorite SS, or one of my favorite camouflage patterns ever made, both the summer and autumn variants. I think it's a really cool and effective pattern, which I'll show you when we do the ballistic test. The camouflage test. I know, Freudian slip. We'll be doing ballistic tests too as well very soon. So when I get out there and I'm actually able to do a camouflage test, I'm probably just going to wear gray trousers, or I might figure out something that's similar to this, because you can't get trousers in this pattern for whatever reason, because they never made them initially, but there's no fantasy pieces, which would be cool to change. Anyway, I digress. So I'll show you, it's quite effective, and in the fall it's very effective as well with the autumn colors. So those were kind of the reasons that they kept wearing the camouflage. It wasn't it wasn't something that was like kind of an idea that was, you know, took some mud, threw it against the wall and see if it stuck. Well, it did stick, and they kept going with it. They figured out how to streamline processes to make the production numbers increase and have more camouflage available to Waffen-SS personnel operating abroad. So in 1942, they did away with these access slits. They modified a few more things. They took and they added a couple camouflage loops up here. And then they actually had two integral pockets in the smock itself, two hip pockets down here. No breast pockets. This remained relatively the same as well. There are nuanced details that I can get into when we go through the different designs of smocks, because I'm trying to increase the collection. This is obviously a reproduction. And yeah, Patreon support has really been helping get all this stuff that you guys have been wanting me to make videos on for years. So just be aware of that. We'll talk about that at the end. But yeah, so 1942 rolls around, and so you're going to see all three variations, which is a collector's term, more or less. The Model 38, which is the earlier ones, the Model 40, which is what I'm wearing. This is the cut, not the pattern, by the way. And the Model 42, right? And so those are going to be an Oak A, Oak B, which is in the oak leaf family. You're going to have Plane Tree 1 through 7, basically. There's 7 or 8 variants or something like that. You're going to have what's called Blurred Edge, which is a weird kind of hybrid between, it looks like ERDL and Oak A had a baby, and a different kind of color scheme came out because of all the mixing colors, which I'll get a smock of that one day, which is pretty cool. But so you got Plane Tree, you've got Oak Leaf, you've got Blurred Edge. You know, it's called Polyspot, which looks kind of like Plane Tree, but it's a little bit different, and there's not a lot of historic photos that document its use, but it did exist in small numbers, and it's one of my favorite patterns as well. Blurred Edge is actually my least favorite pattern. I know, hard to believe. A lot of you guys really like that. That doesn't do anything for me. But anyway, so they had the palm, and then they had what's called overprint, which was, I think, a factory mess up, where it's basically kind of like a Plane Tree, but it looks like the slide, or the whatever you call it, the screens shifted while they were printing, or something got messed up, and it looks, you can tell like there's squares within the pattern of it looking like Plane Tree. It's a really unique pattern. I'll try to get some of that too. I'll try to get one of everything at some point. I do like wearing these things to, you know, be able to physically teach while I'm rambling and like show you what it looks like on an actual person, and not just showing you a black and white or a colorized photo or whatnot. That's why I kind of like doing props and all that stuff, and like playing dressed up to, you know, piss off the people that hate the fact that I love LARPing in my mommy's basement. So anyway, yeah, so I'll get back on track. Again, you guys, like you said, you like long form rambling and all that stuff, and I'm trying to just remember as we're going along, just kind of off the fly, if I'm forgetting anything about the basics. So anyway, the camouflage was used throughout the end of the Second World War, and other patterns were introduced, but you're going to see these in use by a lot of Waffen-SS units. Now, there are exceptions to everything, and one thing that I will cover eventually is the use of SS camouflage by the Hermann Goering Division, which is a Luftwaffe field division operating mostly in Sicily and Italy at their most famous involvement. And they were Luftwaffe troops that were using Waffen-SS camouflage. Now, I'll go into the details of that in the other video. So there are exceptions to this, so it was very well liked by SS troops and all that stuff. Now, there's some speculation as to why the Wehrmacht didn't use the same camouflage. Was it to set these troops apart from the Wehrmacht, you know, as the elites? Or was it because of a patent issue, because there were individual companies and people that owned the patent to these particular patterns? And et cetera, et cetera. So I'll do some more digging on that, and we'll talk about that whole subject too. But anyway, so Waffen-SS camouflage is a very interesting topic. It's very, very popular because it just looks cool, even if you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details. It's going to be really interesting for me to see how well these camouflage patterns work up in this environment. I'm sure they are going to perform fairly well, especially Palmenmuster, which is, again, my favorite. I think that's the basics. There were never any helmet covers made out of dot 44, by the way. I'll just ruin that surprise for you. We'll talk about dot 44 and probably Leibermuster. I just don't know if anybody reproduces that, so I can't really get that. So, yeah. I think that's all I've got for this video, guys. I was going to do this video outside earlier, but literally everything was working against me out there. I just started filming, and somebody fired up a lawnmower right next to me, and it's like, okay, and then very loud, very unnecessarily loud vehicles. It's windy, and I just rage quit, came in here and just filmed the video. But I will be doing the videos where I'm just talking about different patterns and stuff outside, hopefully from now on. And, oh yeah, so it was worn It was worn over the field gray wool uniform, which is why I've got the collar sticking out, right? And again, if you noticed, I did cover up the mini windmill here. It's not because I like censoring history or definitely don't agree with it, but I know that there's a lot of you guys that live in countries where that's not okay to even show on a YouTube video. And I want to be able to get my content out to everybody, especially people in Germany that might not know the history of some camouflage, some really cool camouflage patterns that inspired a lot of modern camouflage from your homeland. So I want everybody to be able to watch that. That's why I'm also not going to throw on, you know, runes and rank and all that stuff. And I don't reenact SS because I'm not that hardcore. Anyway, so that's why I have that covered in case you guys are going to be complaining about that. But because I would honestly complain, and I just honestly forgot about it. But I still wanted to give you kind of the basic overview of camouflage and what we're going to be talking about, and just show off, you know, the recent acquisition. I've got some more stuff coming, and I cannot wait to do a camouflage test. So that's all I've got for this video. This is just kind of a long form rant. I don't even know what I'm going to title this, but if you made it this far, type in palm in the comments, and then whatever else smart-ass thing you're probably going to comment with, just to see if you made it this far. It's a fun little game I usually play on videos, especially long-form rant videos where I can't even keep track of what the hell I'm saying, but hopefully it makes sense. Yeah, if you got any questions about camouflage or specific topics you want me to cover, let me know in the comments as well, because there's some things that I might have missed. I just kind of do freeform videos. Sometimes I'll actually write stuff down and have bullet points in front of me, like when I actually get into the technical specs of each pattern and each pattern of the smock or each cut of the smock and all that stuff, and then we get into dot 44, etc., etc. So some of that stuff I do more organized videos on, but like this is just kind of a fun video. And I get to play dress up, and any excuse I can have to play dress up, I will take. So, all right, well, I think, you know, I've already said I'm going to probably end the video about 5 times as per the usual. So we'll get on to the fun part. I would like to thank the sponsors of this video, my Patreon supporters and channel members. If you want to see more of this stuff and you want to see like camouflage tests on these patterns, you want to learn more about them and have visual aids that help me learn as well as teach you, Patreon and channel membership are 2 great ways to financially support me to offset the cost. I can afford to fund a certain amount of the channel's content and props and visual aids out of pocket. However, there comes a point like with this stuff where it starts really adding up. We're talking like hundreds of dollars just for 1 or 2 videos. Hopefully I can stretch that out, but it gets like that. That's not your problem because I'm putting out the content for free, and I understand that completely. But if you do want to see more stuff, because I would love to have more access to, you know, newer patterns and all that stuff, and just original examples of stuff if I can find it and all that, whatever. Yeah, so that's a great way to do that. And $5 a month or more on either platform gets you to my Discord server, which is a really fun time. There's a lot of people on there already, and we exchange a lot of cool information. There is some decent troll conversations and some good shit posting going on, but it's all a really fun place. A lot of really cool people and smart people on there. So anyway, thank you to all my patrons past and present, and channel members past and present. You guys are awesome. You've allowed me to get this and finally crack the surface on this, because you guys have been hounding me for years, and I understand that, but it's expensive, and now it's, you know, I've got the crowdfunding has really been awesome, so now here we go. If you can't support the channel financially and you still want to support me, I totally get that. Like, I get money's tight for a lot of people. I've been there. Trust me, I was there for a long time. And that's totally fine. You can still support me if you so choose and want to keep this going with, you know, obviously giving the video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, throw in something in the comments of what you thought of the video. It helps the algorithm, I guess. Who knows? They change it every day, but that's what they tell me. And also, sharing this video out is a really cool way to support the channel, and any channel that you want to support. That's a really nice, free, easy way to support whoever content creators you want to and you like, is just sharing the video and getting people to recognize, oh, hey, well, there's more than all these priority creators that, you know, all these mainstream people. There's people that do other weird topics that are pretty interesting, or, you know, whatever. And if you're in the third category and you just don't want to support me, you're just like, I'm sorry to say this, but you already have by watching this video. So thank you to everyone who has watched, and we'll see you on the next video.